Welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is September the 25th, Ezra chapter 9. And
really uplifting, joyful. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'll be honest with you. A lot of these passages for the last 2 months have not been very joyful and uplifting.
The exile was a real bummer.
Yeah. And there were points I made a note in my journal. There were times when Jeremiah spoke some positive things, for example, but there would be like a verse or two surrounded by 5,000 verses of, you're all corrupt and dying and God's going to judge you. This is kind of a similar thing. It says, when these things had been done, the Jewish leaders came to me and said, many of the people of Israel and even some of the priests and Levites have not kept themselves separate from the other peoples living in the land. They have taken up the detestable practices of the Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Ammonites, Moabites, Egyptians, and Amorites. For the men of Israel have married women from these people and have taken them as wives for their sons. So the holy race has become polluted by these mixed marriages. Worse yet, the leaders and officials have led the way in this outrage. So I think it's appropriate because I do believe that at times verses like this get taken out of context and abused. So I think it's appropriate for us to address, one, why was intermarriage, that's the way we should probably describe it, intermarriage, a problem? Yeah, let's just start there. Why was that a problem? What was going on?
Well, all the way back in the beginning of the Exodus, Moses challenged the people in this regard. He said, because what will happen is you will become like them. They'll influence you little by little. And that same theme has been reiterated throughout the Old Testament, and we see it come up here again. And he said, at the bottom line here, it says they have taken up the detestable practices. It was the mere fact that they didn't have faith in God. They didn't worship the God of the Israelites. And in intermarrying with them, they took on a lot of their customs, including the worship of false gods and idols, etc. And so it was first and foremost a faith issue related to their service and commitment to God.
Right. It's not a race thing. It is the Canaanites had their own gods, the Jebus, all of these different people had their own gods. And so if you married somebody that was a Canaanite, you were mixing households with, they had their household gods and they'd bring that and it would just become a melting pot of religions. And we've seen that before where they still were kind of serving God, but they kind of weren't. That's kind of the whole story of lots of different chapters. So I think it really is about religion and following God. It's not about a race thing.
Yeah, it's faith compromise.
So when it says holy race, and it uses it here, it uses it in the New American Standard Bible, you believe he's speaking specifically about spiritual issues, not...
NASB says holy seed, like the holy line, or the literally is a seed. So
I have a NASB, and it says holy race.
NASB 2020.
Oh, no, this would be... I don't know what.
It says holy line. Well, let's go
to different updates on the same translation.
Let's see what the message says. The authoritative message. No, it says holy seed there. I think the Bible, the Old Testament is the story of a family, if you really think about it, and so that family is what is talked about, their relationship with the divine, and so.
So he's talking about the Jewish people. I mean, whatever how you want to categorize them.
So and they still, I mean, for the most part, Jewish people still practice this today. I mean, they're very dogmatic about, like, you can't marry outside of your faith. So that would lead me to the next question about considerations for a spouse. Recently, a couple of days ago on a podcast, we talked about how do you choose your spouse. And I mentioned myself that some things were overrated, like beauty and attraction. How high on the list should religion and spiritual formation be in choosing a spouse? And is there a time when it would be appropriate to step outside of your faith to marry?
I think that
I'm trying to make our podcast ratings go up.
that's why I went to a Pentecostal college and married a Pentecostal boy. That's what I'll say. So I think...
Stop right there. You say that semi-offhandedly,
No.
but is there some measure of truth into that?
I think when you're raised in a similar way, you have an underlying understanding. But I think there's differences that Tyler and I have because I was raised in Ohio and he was raised in Iowa, And so, but I think that for me, part of what I found really important was like going to church on a Sunday and raising kids a certain way. And so that was important to me. And so I made a decision that I was going to marry someone who would have those same beliefs as me, and that we wouldn't be like, well, I'm going to this other type of church because I don't think the same way about God that you do.
Can I follow that up by asking, and both of you can answer this question. If you had imagined, if
picturing it.
Yeah, the religion tension was on the table, added to, because we're all married, we understand this.
Not to each other. Just wanted to clear that up for anyone.
Yeah, new maybe listening of the challenges of marriage. Imagine adding to marriage a religion tension on top of it. How do you think you and Tyler would have fared had he been Jewish or even Catholic?
I mean, it would have added some tough things because I think if Saturday his phone was off all day and he was practicing the Sabbath, there would be a lot of tension because, family things would happen on Saturdays and I'd want to go drive to do this or that. And I think it would have taken a lot of extra figuring out before we had gotten married. I mean,
it's funny that you say that. I recently listened to a podcast from someone who is a non-religious person, and they were interviewing someone that is overseeing a multi-religion school of some kind in Jerusalem, but he is Jewish, but he hasn't always practiced the Jewish faith, but he recently has in the last few years. And he talked about the Sabbath, and he said, I did not realize how much strain it was going to put on my interpersonal relationships by telling everybody no on Saturday. No, we can't go to dinner. No, we can't come to your birthday party. No, we can't go to the beach. No, we can't. No, we can't. No, we can't. No, we can't. And he said, because that is the day that everybody wants to do things. Jay, in your case, how do you think it would have affected your home?
Oh, significantly. I mean, when you add one more thing in the mix, and typically people of faith, whatever it is, whatever it looks like for that individual, usually is fairly committed to that. I mean, they have strong beliefs and feelings about that. So that to add that built-in tension, even division, I think it could wreak havoc on a relationship.
Well, typically, my experience is one gravitates one way or the other. It's almost like family gatherings. This isn't always the case, but what I see often in families is that they tend to gravitate to one side or the other. The family does not. Both don't get equal treatment. It's like, okay, right, we relate over here or we relate over
But
here.
Even in that scenario, what I see as well, and perhaps may have experienced to some degree, is even though there may be a gravitation toward one more than the other, that within itself creates tension and problem and conflicts, and can lead to resentment and bitterness, and the list can go on. And so we're talking about tensions again amongst people with different views and values or faith. Then think about the ones, where one person has a strong faith in, I think you had asked the question in this way earlier, with a person who has no faith at all. I can't imagine the conflicts and the struggles that creates within a relationship.
So he goes on in verse 3 and he says, when I heard this, I tore my cloak and my shirt, pulled hair from my head and beard, and sat down utterly shocked. Then all who trembled at the words of the God of Israel came and sat with me because of this outrage committed by the returned exiles. And I sat there utterly appalled until the time of the evening sacrifice. At the time of the evening sacrifice, I stood up from where I had sat in mourning with my clothes torn. I fell to my knees and lifted my hands to the Lord my God. This is a big deal to Ezra. I mean, he is really distraught about this one thing. One, I've never seen anybody get that distraught about this issue. I haven't seen it with my eyes. I have personally been distraught about seeing relationships consummated that I felt like were flawed. But my question is this, what I wrote down is, what types of things should drive us to mourning? He was mourning. What types of things maybe move you, like really distress you to the place that I don't know if you pull your hair out. I mean, that's still a common saying, I'm pulling my hair out. We still use that saying. But to where you're just overwhelmed with the situation, what kind of things cause you to mourn in that fashion?
Why don't you go first, Steve?
Okay. Well, for me, 100% of the time, and I take that back. I can think of 2 or 3 other times where I was personally moved by somebody else's situation like that. But for the most part, mostly, it is family struggles that drive me to this place. It's either something I have done, or tension that I'm experiencing, or frustration I'm experiencing inside the family, or one of my kids are suffering, one of my grandkids are suffering. I can think of 2 or 3 times, 2 that come to mind outside of family, where I was distressed over someone's situation. There was a young lady. I was not even pastor. I was formally pastor, I should say, by the time she passed. But she was, I don't know, early 30s, 32, 33, and had some complications. And she ended up passing, had cancer, and passed early in my time here. And I just remember on her behalf, just feeling distressed and overwhelmed and praying literally to the point of exhaustion for her. And so, but most of the time it's family related. So what about you?
I would totally agree. There are times when I have compassion. There are times when I hurt with and for people, but it's not on the level that he's talking about here. Those times and seasons have been directly related to, like you said, family. It could be your own. It could be your spouse. It could be your children, grandchildren. But that circle usually draws out the most intense feelings and emotions.
Yeah, I think family and then friends that you've known for years, and when something hits them and you see things that other people don't, that they're going through, I think that can really hit you.
Yeah. I would agree. And often you said that's a key word, I think. The reason why we don't see people weep and wail like this is usually it is things that most people don't know are happening. And so they become private moments where we try to keep ourselves. I mean, I've been times, look, I've walked in that pulpit and preached after spending the night at the hospital with my daughter, nearly dead. And never said a word about it.
Right.
Didn't say anything publicly about it because it wasn't my place to put it on other people. And I think one of the reasons why we don't see it is because it is individual and we do it privately. And I'm going to consume this whole podcast talking about this thing. That's okay. But is there any value in being more public about those things so that people in the room, so I'll give you an example, Jay. I as we're recording this, I would have preached at Bertie campus the Sunday before, and I was personally moved watching 2 or 3 people like literally wailing, and I don't know what was on their heart. I have no idea but I was moved because of them. Is there any value in bringing that corporately so other people can find some release? Say, I'm not the only one that has these difficult times. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think sometimes there is. You have to always be sensitive to the people who are going through the struggle. That it's okay with them to share or make that more public, even on the level of a prayer request. There are people, I'll give you an example. Several weeks ago, I got a call from a gentleman who attends our campus, and he said, I want to share something with you, but I don't want it to be told to anybody else. And he was sharing a situation they just discovered about his wife. And he was burdened and heavy-hearted, and we prayed even there on the phone, and we've done since then. But he got to a place where it was okay for me to share that publicly so that more people could come alongside them, not only to pray, but to love on them, care for them, help meet practical needs that they had. But I felt like I had a responsibility to make sure that they were comfortable with that. So I do think there are times when it is beneficial. You mentioned a couple of people, and you had shared briefly with me and just given me a physical description of the people, and I knew who they were and knew a lot of their story. And so I could relate a lot more to them than perhaps even you could in that moment. But not a lot of people, perhaps even in the church, do, because maybe they've not gotten to that place yet where they want to share that. But I do think there is value in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of 2 sides of this. One, we have Brene Brown, who probably a lot of people have heard of. If you haven't, she talks about vulnerability a lot and how it's really good to be vulnerable. But there is a level of vulnerability that needs to remain private or with a smaller group of people, because I can think of the other side, that there was a woman on social media who was having mental health episodes, and she shared hundreds of videos on TikTok within a period of like 24 hours, and that it went very poorly. And so there's that level of, yes, we need to be honest, but like how honest and to who is still a question of, do we post this on social media? Because a lot of times that can take it to other places. And I don't know, I think like small groups is a great place to be vulnerable, to kind of test those boundaries of vulnerability, to push yourself to share something that you wouldn't share in another place. But there still have to be boundaries. People tend to be one or the other. They're like, I'm not going to share anything private about my life.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Here is my heart, take it world.
I've seen a couple of videos that were posted or clips of videos where people came up and shared stuff, and you were like, oh my goodness, you should have never said that.
Yeah, well, I think that's the challenge. When it comes to vulnerability, when it comes to brokenness, when it comes to struggles, is striking that balance to what's appropriate. Because if you're going to tell it, you got to tell enough of it so that people can feel the pain of it with you. Right. But you can also tell too much to where they don't even, they're overwhelmed by it. They're like, oh my, it becomes, instead of sympathy, it becomes repulsive almost.
Or awkward.
Yeah, extremely.
I mean, sometimes these are going to be awkward, but.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, we need to close up. Alyssa, do you mind praying today as we close?
Sure, I'll be vulnerable. Lord, we thank you for these tough passages that we can talk about and try to make sense of and how we can apply it to our lives today. I thank you for your words that you give us and the things that you teach us, and help us today to be vulnerable in the right places and to have sympathy for those around us that are in need. In Jesus' name, amen.